There we go. That looks better, Frank.
Well, I never look good, but yeah.
Okay, we're recording. Hey, guess what? We can go ahead and start the meeting. That's exciting. Welcome to January's Mix It Up. Thrilled as always to see all of you on here. It's kind of funny how some of these things go. It just seemed toward the end of the year, a lot of questions and a lot of discussions were bubbling up around permissions and security in BC. If you've fiddled with them at all, you know it's just a never-ending joy trying to understand the architecture and your options with it. They continue to make a lot of improvements with the tools and the setup. And we thought, hey, since it's coming up quite a bit, let's just go ahead and share some of those tips and see what folks know. And I think we even have some tips outside of conventional Business Central dealing with Office and so forth and just security in general today. So it should be a very interesting discussion. Quite a few presenters lined up. Let's go ahead and let me start cranking through the slides so we can get to our tips. And a reminder that, of course, we do this on a monthly basis. We are recording it. We post it out on the Mix It Up YouTube channel so you can share it with friends and family. And in February, we're going to have a panel on, and I'm going to be asking questions to them about how they prepare for audits, because, well, that's kind of what's happening right now, right? So let's share some experiences with that, and maybe some of the pain and successes out of going through audits and helping everybody prepare better for that. So go ahead and sign up for that. If you're a member of the meetup group, you get notifications automatically, so that makes it a lot easier. Then in March, if you haven't seen this yet, DynamicsCon is a free event, 3 days now, covering all the Dynamics products. They have 450 sessions submitted for consideration, and the schedule is open and available to vote on. We all get to pick what sessions are going to be on the schedule, which is a great approach. That voting ends on Friday. So hop out there and submit your votes quickly for that. If, well, since I'm talking, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage and say we've got from New View Strategies, me and my team have quite a few sessions out there if you'd like to vote for us. If you get our newsletter, it just went out earlier today, and it's got links for all our sessions out there. You can go look for us as well. And we've been doing quite a bit of social around that. And since we're also talking about permissions and security, I want to let you know there is a class in it, 4-hour class tomorrow that New View Strategies is working with eFocus on. You still have an opportunity to register for that class if you're interested in more in-depth training as well. So, all right. Now, again, try to share your video camera if you'd like, just to help with the audio and the interference. You know, keep yourself on mute, but please take yourself on mute. Jump in with comments and questions and other tips as we're moving through this. And another reminder, always interested in improving. I'll put a survey link in the chat towards the end of the call. Take the survey, and the person that provides the best tip today gets one of these nifty tie-dye shirts, so it's pretty important that you fill that out. Now, we were going to have a guest bartender today making one of my more favorite drinks when I'm in New Orleans is a hurricane, but there was a bit of an emergency and I didn't get many more details than that. Just came in about 10 minutes ago. So Steve, hopefully he's doing okay, or his family's doing okay, but Steve's not available to make the drink for us today. Now, I believe our regular bartender, Kim Ko, is scrambled and prepared something for us with a moment's notice, which is incredibly impressive. And I'm really interested to see what she's got going on. So, Kim, what are you making for us?
All right. Well, you know, since it's in honor of Dry January, I thought I would do a non-alcoholic tequila. So you just take non-alcoholic tequila, you open the bottle. Ooh, smells like it has alcohol in. I'm not sure how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you just pour it in your glass and then just enjoy it. I mean, it's kind of like a hurricane after you drink the whole bottle, but you know.
It's hard to tell after a few. Yeah.
The salt. Kim, wait, the salt.
No salt. Just non-alcoholic tequila.
She drinks the good stuff. You don't need it. But
Yeah,
is
you don't
anybody
need salt.
concerned that she's got a bottle from fairly within arm's reach at a moment's notice?
I mean, I can move it over here if you're concerned, but I mean,
Seems
it doesn't
appropriate,
have any
Mark.
alcohol.
That is an impressive bit of scrambling. Thank you.
Hey, anytime.
What brand in particular is that?
Okay, well, this is one of my favorites. So this is, there's 3 bottles. There's a 1, 2, and 3, or uno, dos, and tres. It's an organic tequila. This is a reposado. So it's aged, I think, anywhere between 6 months and a year. So it's very good.
Wow.
Little smoky, but it goes down really smooth, you know. So yeah.
Very nice.
I'll put it over here. It's a little bit out of arm's reach then.
I think that is considerably less complicated to make than a hurricane. So appreciate that, Kim.
Yeah, I didn't have half that stuff.
Yeah. I'm not even sure where to get passion fruit juice. We'll find out. All right. Fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. Like I said, we got a whole panel today from many different angles. We've got partners traditionally in BC, partners not in BC, end users and so forth here. So really have an assortment, and I'm looking forward to this discussion quite a bit. Cynthia, I chose you first because I knew you'd be ready to go. And what do you got to share with us?
Well, you knew wrong, but I can still share with you first. So let me share my screen. So when it comes to security and permissions, I just thought I would talk about some of the basics, because what I'm finding is a lot of people are very worried about the technology and what's in Business Central that I can use and how can I use it. And they get so wrapped up in that, they don't actually lay the groundwork to have a successful permissions rollout. So let me share my screen. And I want to show you, everybody, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, I don't know if I'm dating myself or not. Oh, I should be in slideshow mode here, but oh, now I'm on the wrong screen. Let's see here. I love it when technology doesn't work the way I want. See, I wasn't prepared, Mark. How about that?
Wow, that's
well, hey,
first time.
I was on with a customer doing testing for a go live, so give me a break here. All right, let me do it this way.
That's what happens when you have back to back meetings.
Yes. I know, and that's what I'm dealing with. All right, we'll do it this way. Okay, we'll try this again. Now, how's that?
Super.
Yay. All right. So again, I'm dating myself, but it's kind of like, and you get super user and you get super, everyone gets super user. How many of us are either in that situation or have been trying to help a customer who's in that situation? And who is that? What? That's Oprah. And she does these or used to do these major giveaways, and everyone in the audience got the gifts, right? So everyone in the company becomes super user. Well, this is why that's really, really, really scary. So this is from CPA Practice Advisor. And if you are responsible for security and permissions in your organization and you're having a hard time getting someone to agree to a project that's going to take some time and energy, and they say, well, you know what, that's just too much work, we don't need to do that. Well, guess what? The numbers are pretty scary, because anybody can end up being an employee who's tempted and does something that they wouldn't normally do. So putting them in a situation where they have access to information could create a bad person out of a good person. And interestingly enough, what they find is that individuals who are caught doing fraudulent activities, it's not just the first time they got caught, but it was the first time they did it, because they're probably not really good at it, but they were tempted, right? So remove the temptation. And 18 is the average number of months it takes to find that fraud. So you can imagine if someone is doing something repetitively, what that could mean. And what that can mean, in this case, they found that on average, it's $140,000. I was actually involved in a project where we were trying to uncover how much was stolen by a very trusted employee. And it was about 200,000. And interestingly enough, they found it after about 18 months. So it was right on the average. So if you need some ammunition to convince somebody that putting permissions into your system is important, this might just be the ammunition that you need. The other thing that I find is really difficult is where do I even start? So you look at it and you get overwhelmed. So one of the things that you can do is create a spreadsheet, right, or a workbook, and take what we call a security matrix and sit down with individuals in the enterprise. It's not just an IT function, and say, all right, here in this column A, here are the types of roles within my organization. I have an AP manager and I have AP staff, AR manager and AR staff. You may not, you might just have an accountant, right? Or you have all of these positions. And then what you do is you look at each functional area and you say, okay, if it's an AP manager, of course, there's going to be a lot of things in the AP functional area that they have access to. But what do they need to have access to in inventory? What do they need to have access to, if anything, in general accounting or finance? So you actually need to look at each one of these roles and just plan from a user perspective. Don't worry as much about what's in Business Central and the Business Central permissions, because that's not important at this point. You're trying to figure out what your organization needs to make things work. And one of the things that has really come out of this, if you take this approach, sometimes it's not just a matter of what permissions you're giving to someone, but it could be a matter of what functionality you're having them use. If you're the type of organization that you do everything from your sales orders, for example, you ship and somebody creates the order, somebody ships and somebody invoices, and everybody's working out of the sales order, and you need to set up some sort of permissions where, well, when the person's shipping, they shouldn't be able to change XYZ on the sales order. Well, we don't have field by field security out of the box in Business Central, but what we could do is use sales order shipping. So if you're managing your ship and invoice process all from the sales order, maybe it's that you need to disallow the people who are doing shipping to access the sales order page, and they will use sales order shipping. We also have sales order invoicing. So sometimes it's not just a matter of what permissions you are giving someone, but it's how you're using the system. So this permission project can actually help you find efficiencies or other ways to more effectively use the system. And then when it's all said and done, when you've got this all figured out, there are tools that you can use in Business Central to make the process of using what you determined by filling out that matrix, using what you've determined by deciding you're going to use sales order shipping and sales order invoicing, and define your own permission sets to assign to your people. Don't try to make one of the 74 permission sets that Microsoft provides us work, because most of the time you can't. Even if you copy and you try to pare them down or add to them, you're going to spend probably more time than necessary if you don't use some of the other tools that are available. And if someone else doesn't bring up one of the other tools, I'll add it at the end. So that's what I had to share. It was a little bit more about the planning and why you should go about permissions and security in Business Central.
Would be interesting to know how many customers have actually taken the time to go through it, or just kind of throw up their hands up front and have never really revisited. Be interesting to do that kind of survey.
We maybe should do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, does anybody have tag on thoughts or questions related to all that?
I guess not.
Raise my hand, I guess. Hold on, let me put my camera on. One of the things we did was we identified those areas that were problematic. We'll put it that way. And we added columns to our user setup page. And we turn on and off access to things, whether it be the GL, approvals, any number of things, right down to who can edit a sales order line, the description. As we found problems, that's the way we handled it. Is it the right way? Probably not, but it gives us such flexibility because you can just, go in there and make changes really quickly and on the fly and on a user by user basis. It's an unusual solution, but it works well for us.
So interestingly enough, I had seen that previously, and I know when Easy Security came out, that helped to address some of those situations, but that still could be overwhelming. And then with Business Central, we kind of lost Easy Security because they did not move their solution to that world or to that platform. So to address what you've addressed, Greg, there is a product out there called Advanced Security by eFocus. And I have had the privilege of working with that a couple of times. And that does allow you to do some of those things that you're describing with an app that you can, subscribe to. I'm just really in the infancy of those projects, but I'm liking what I'm seeing. So it eliminates that need to do a customization, especially if you're a Business Central user and you're worried about your extensions and too many other things that bump up against it. But Greg, I've seen that before, and I do think it works very effectively. So kudos to you for doing it that way. But that advanced security is another way to look at that.
Yeah, we've been on BC since 2009, or actually started with NAV in 2009. So this has been well refined and works really well for us. Yes, we have quite a few columns there. I want to say about 24 columns. And it's really, really nice. Like when somebody goes on vacation and you want to switch a role for somebody. So say permission to approve a sales quota. I uncheck one guy and check another guy and bada bing, bada boom, it's all working, Sounds like if that app had been around at the time, maybe, but now we've got it. I don't think we've done anything new in there for a long, long time, but we did bring it over when we went to BC, and it works. It just works.
Yeah.
Hey, Cynthia, I don't know if you saw David Gersten's note in the chat. He said he'd like to hear about the tools. You already brought up the eFocus tools, and then he also said, hey, he's heard that Merge Tool isn't migrating over to BC. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, so again, they are, from what I understand, they are not migrating over to BC, and the team at eFocus basically, I don't know if anybody is on this call from them, but my understanding is they kind of reached out to Peer and said, hey, if you're not going to do this, we have an idea. And that's where they came up with their advanced security. And so I have one customer I'm working with right now where I really want them to get it, but it's not time for them. And then I have another. What's really great about it is you can actually filter data available. So with their tool, you can say that an individual only can see a group of GL accounts. So when they go to use GL accounts on a line, so maybe it's expense accounts or certain accounts. So you can actually filter not just results, but also what they're able to see on a fast tab or access on a fast tab, as well as actions up in the navigation bar in the navigation menu. So again, I'm in the infancy of working with it, but I'm really liking what I'm seeing, and maybe I'll do a little bit of a review later on if, in another BC, mix it up if anyone wants to know after we've worked with it for a little while. The other thing is Easy Security had that recording tool. And of course, that was a huge thing. And of course, Microsoft said, that's a great idea. So we actually have a recording tool built into the system now. And it's interesting how many organizations say, you know what, I don't want to spend the time asking people to do recordings so that they can only get to what they're supposed to do. I'd rather just try to make my own permission sets. I find that in my experience, they spend way more time trying to make their own permission sets than any recordings would ever take. And you have way less frustration of the results with the recorder than you do if you try to manage it with permission sets you're building yourself.
Yep, exactly. All right, I guess no other questions, comments. Let's move on then.
I had one comment about the recorder. I use it for troubleshooting, but I don't use the results. I don't use them as permission sets because in my opinion, you just end up with something that's totally unmanageable because you've suddenly got 30 permission sets, all with like duplicate permissions in them. The way we build ours, we have a permission set called basic, which is what every user should have. And then on top of that, we have, role specific ones. And some people might have multiple roles, but with permission set, you'll end up with, you have to be able to look up the company information in every single permission set. And I think it's just making a mess to manage long term. But it's great for troubleshoot.
Right. No, and I get that, but without going into too much detail, we actually, by using that matrix, we actually come up with an approach where, yes, you do have a lot of permission sets, but because you have a lot, it actually becomes easier to manage because they're actually more targeted to a task. And then those permission sets get assigned to the user groups. But again, every organization is different, and we know what tools we have available, and it sounds like a lot of people have different approaches, and that's what's the beauty of this system, right? We can all look at it. I kind of joke, one of the things I like to say is I hope that I help customers come up with the righter way to do things, because there's more than one right way to do things in Business Central, and we all know that. Right. But it's what's the righter way for your organization.
And the other big problem we have with permission sets, and I don't know if it's something in BC 2020, is indirect just doesn't seem to work.
Yeah,
the amount of permissions I have to give, I have to give basic users like read write access or worse, write access and insert and modify to stuff they should never have access to, because indirect just doesn't work.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I've not across the board, but frequently.
Well, the balance between efficiencies to administer security and the traditional controls you need to have about who's requesting access, who's approving access, and the paper trail behind it. And sometimes as we build out more permission sets and we find tools to make it easier to assign security, we lose sight of the back end paperwork. And then when you actually find a permission set that grants too much security because it was so easy to grant, you have to unwind things, and it becomes quite a burdensome task, and your risk of fraud exposure, speaking as an auditor, is greater. So it's a balancing act of how easily can we maintain security with the tool, but at the same time capture some of the history behind it, so it's not willy-nilly, click, no, they have what they need. Well, who requested it, who approved it, because ultimately each piece of data has to be owned by someone, and they should be assigning and approving access to that data. So each company is different, but it's a balancing act, which is challenging, especially for smaller companies with smaller IT departments that they probably weren't hired to be the security admin to begin with. They want to get back to their day job, and security is more of a headache than anything else.
Well said.
Well, it's been long my opinion that because the tables interact so much with each other, going down the path of making all the security around tables has just been a nightmare. I wish Microsoft had, or back in the days in the Vision people, had focused more on making page security. Because if you can't see it, you can't go in there and mess with it. That's my philosophy. But unfortunately, they chose the path, and it's just proven to, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we went with all the check boxes. So my philosophy, again, if they can't see it, they can't break it.
So am I missing something? Because you do have page security.
We have page security, so that may be a version thing.
Oh, we have page security. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that if you look at all the out of the box security, okay, you look at the role centers and the permissions that come out of the box, they're all basically set up around tables. They're not set up around pages. Generally speaking, they all have give them all the pages and then control the tables. And I'm saying it should be the other way around. Give them all the tables and control the pages.
I mean, that's why I say those 74 permission sets that they provide us are basically not very helpful at all.
Right, and it's not only that, they're not very helpful because they're very dangerous. Like there's one called Sales Doc Edit, and that gives you write access to the general ledger setup. It's like, why does somebody who needs to create sales orders need access to the general ledger setup and write access to it. They're
Well,
terrible. There's
I was
built-in
going to
ones.
say general ledger setups in a lot of them.
Right, for
Interesting.
read it has to be, because you have to
Right.
read a bunch of stuff like periods, but
But
like
edit.
the sales doc edit has I think at least edit, if not insert and delete in the general ledger setup. And it's crazy. They're terrible, those sets, and there's so much duplication in them as well. But so I just started from scratch in the end.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point too, and I know this is being recorded, Mark, and this is the case across the Dynamics line. We see this all the time at FastPath. Don't assume Microsoft did everything perfectly when it came to designing security inside the application, Business Central, F&O, whatever it might be. The permission sets you're talking about are a great example. If you ran stuff from a segregation of duties perspective natively, permission sets in BC, in roles and F&O littered with segregation of duty conflicts. So you have to get a baseline what your company needs, but make sure that the customers and users understand it's trust and verify. You don't just trust. Determine what you need, do your own analysis to make sure you're not actually provisioning things that have holes that you weren't aware of because you assume Microsoft did everything correctly. There are those gaps there. It's great for us ISVs that can fill that gap, but more importantly, the trust has to be in what you set up and not what the software manufacturer has provided to work with. You're sort of baking a cake. There's different ingredients, but you got to put them together and get comfortable with it.
It's a really good point. It begs the question: how did Microsoft even come up with that? Right? That would be interesting to talk to the R&D team about. Hey, I want to make sure we have enough time for everybody that's ready to share, that has prepared for this. So we're going to go ahead and move on. But I love this discussion, and that's what we're here for. So appreciate that. So let me go ahead and get back to my slide here, and we have David Wheat with Sovos Brands. David.
Hey, everybody. Unlike the well-prepared Cynthia, I don't have slides, so I feel a little bit naked. And so, Mark, do you mind, now that we've seen everyone's picture, if we just go back to video and I can just talk through a couple things?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. You guys have had some great discussions, so I'm going to chime in on a little bit. I'll tell you really quickly our environment. We're on BC 14 on-prem. So we still have, and we have easy security, and we still have it. So really interested to hear, that there is now something popping up out there that's going to replace easy security. And just like Cynthia said, when I got to what was then Noosa Yogurt, so Sovos Brands is a food brands company. They own 4 delicious brands of food, which I won't go into right now in the interest of time. But I started off at Noosa Yogurt here in Colorado, and when I got there, they'd been live for about 2 months on NAV 2015, and 100% of their live users had super user. The Oprah Winfrey giveaway.
Oh.
So here's my first piece of advice. You have to bake security into your implementation project. And when you do UAT, which you should, you're also testing permissions. Now, your UAT is going to go bonk the first few days while you work through that. But let me tell you why. If you had 1 month to your implementation project to get security right, as we all know, once you go live, nobody cares or has an appetite to fix permissions. It will be 1 to 2 years before, unless you're just a rockin' much better team than ours, which is probably fine, but you're not going to get anyone's attention after it goes live. So I'm a fan of, even when you do an upgrade, when you're doing your testing before you migrate that, it ought to be permissions testing too. Or what did you really test? So trust me, I get that people, everyone's trying to do the schedule as fast as they can, but I think as leaders we need to advocate for the right way. So that's a lesson I had. So it took us forever to dial back all those super users, and painful. Anyone understand what the analysis view table is and why everybody needs indirect to the analysis view? I don't, but it comes up all the time. Has nothing to do with accounts payable. But we had to grind through that. The other thing I would tell you, on your journey from super to like super dialed in high precision permissions, it's better to go deep than wide. So if a lot of people have to have permissions to every field on the item card, that's better than them being able to post a journal when they have no business posting a journal. So if you're going to go from awful, which is where we were, just at least start dialing in big chunks, and then, the unpopular truth is you just have to iterate through that, and then you keep refining it and refining it. And then, if any of your companies have thought about going public or going public, then you're going to have to go, gnat's eyelash and really get segregation of duties done and things like that. Let me see what else. Someone, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Frank. He kind of dropped the P word. You've got to have processes that support security. Who can request a security change? There's a thing I call, and I don't think I made this up, self-nomination. Hey, I'd like access to whatever. Yeah, sure. You look like a nice guy, So we can't think of security as just IT grinding through easy security or nav permissions, like getting a manager approval. And then if you have a controller who might have an eye towards segregation of duties issues, what's your approval process? Do you do it in a ticketing system so that you always have a record of it in case someone says, how did this happen? And those don't have to be awful and bureaucratic. They really protect the company. Cynthia alluded to that in her slide on fraud. They protect you as a functional or IT leader, that you know what you're doing. What makes that hard, we've learned also, is permissions are sticky. So, Bob changes a role from accounting to not accounting. Nobody tells us, we give it permissions, but he's still got accounting. And then they say things like this, right? Like, well, they're going to overlap for 2 months. So it's got to have everything, So anyway, just those are kind of things that, again, fall into the process bucket. What is your process for when people request or need to change permissions? I will say, not to offend our fast path friends here, but we did write our own segregation of duties report because we have the luxury of a report developer, with SSRS, and all those permissions are in tables. But another process you need to have, public or not, is access review. Can you spit out your permissions in a format that regular business folks, your plant, your cost accountants, your controllers, your accounts payable supervisor can look down the list and see, names and see if they've got the right permissions. And then final thing, I know I'm all over, but the grind that we went through, we insisted. So easy security gives you things called permission groups, where you roll up permission sets. And does out of the box BC have that same concept? I apologize for not knowing.
We have user groups.
A user group's just a way to roll up permission sets into a thing. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's different from what they see on their screen when they log in. It's not their profile, right? It's their security.
Correct. Nope, it's
Perfect.
different.
Yeah, we finally just insisted on having those be job titles. Which sounds, even as it comes out of my lips, stunningly simple, and like I might be like telling everyone in the room that's done that 10 years ago. But we used to have 18 permission groups, which was a roll up, and we couldn't, it didn't mean anything, but we try now to roll up to one permission group that says accounts payable clerk 1, or accounts payable supervisor, or corporate controller, or whatever. And that gets dicey in a small company, as Frank alluded to, because job titles are squishy. But before that, we were trying to do the pile of permission sets. Our permission groups were too many, and now we've kind of standardized that, if you will. And all that's, everything I've just told you has taken us, 3 or 4 years to mature. It's a maturing process from all super to kind of reusable job title based permission groups. Sorry, I should have done slides. Anyway, that's my journey. And by the way, we're a company that's considering going public, so we're doing a lot of prep work. And you know, it's either pay me now or pay me later, everybody, you know. So
What kind of things are you doing to prepare to go public? Just curious, as far as BC goes.
yeah, it's a great question. So we're just, I'd say we've just added a lens to look at our security more finely, you know. So now that we know someone's going to come in and say, here, you know, an audit essentially, we're asking ourselves harder questions. You know, we've got 12 people who can make an inventory adjustment. You know, is that right? You know, so we're like, literally, it's like internal, like reflection on roles and who's doing what. And then people say, no, that's not right. Only these roles should be able to do, you know, an item journal entry. And then we just iteratively go through that, those kinds of things. Very much, obviously, Belinda, segregation of duties. You know, we weren't too squishy about who could create a vendor and make a payment before. I mean, it was kind of the same group, but now we're saying, you know, so there's a lot of role redefinition. Only the supervisor can approve payments, and only another disconnected from that group can make vendors. We're centralizing master data a lot. A lot of that's going to come to where IT, you fill out a form and IT does the creation after some approval, instead of having so many people have create capability, especially things like vendor. That would be a really dicey one if you could create a vendor and a payment. So just it's kind of everything you guys have all done all the time, but with just extra, just knowing someone's going to audit you really changes your focus for sure.
One more question, and this is
Sure.
non-BC related. What are you, what tool are you using to document all of these things? I mean, Word or what? What are you using?
Yeah, Microsoft Word. We're writing. So I should have answered starting by this way. Like a lot of medium-sized companies, we had pretty good processes, poorly documented. We were doing rightish things every day, but couldn't point to a thing and say we're doing it like that. So we've had to convert a lot in the writing, and we're just, you know, we're just using Word and Visio and swim lane diagrams and things like that. It's not rocket science to get that stuff down on paper. Great questions.
A great story, as always, David.
Thank you. Anything else before we move on to the next? Sweet.
A great point about you better get security planted in your implementation, because you won't get the time to go back and do it later. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets pushed to the back end to begin with, and you get crunched and doesn't get tested right, and you're always swimming upstream, or you're down 20,000 leagues at the bottom trying to get back up.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Frank. Let me say one more thing. We have a strategy. When we do roll out a new kind of revision to our permissions, first of all, we don't do the whole company at once. We do them kind of in functional groups. And then, you know, don't be afraid to give someone back super for the day while you're trouble. I know I just violated everything I said, but like we can enable super for the day. And we've got our change log turned on for things like, you know, and we don't tell them this, but then we fix it. But like, we've got a limit of like 1 business day on that, because you have to, you know, if the shipping department can't ship, give them super. Don't forget you gave them super. That's the tricky part. But I mean, that's kind of a shortcut. But you have to sometimes keep operational, because you're not going to get it perfect even in UAT.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're not going to get security perfect unless you have unlimited resources. And even if you do, that's not taking a risk-based approach. That's not the right use of those resources. And,
Right.
and that limiting super and tracking the assignment of it temporarily, David, that's a good example of things from a SOX perspective. When you go public, you're going to have to show controls you have around that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. That'll be a documented decision. Great point, Frank.
So with that, I certainly want to introduce Nate Boucher and Frank Vukovitz. Security and segregation of duties might be their favoriteest topics in the world, and I bet they're excited to share with us today. Is that true, Nate and Frank?
Well, I think, and from a work perspective, I think Nate would tell you Iowa Hawkeyes athletics might be his favorite topic in the world. But yes, yeah. So let me pull up my deck here and share it out real quick. Do you have the slides in? Oh, you're even better.
Sure.
Well, let me not do that then. All right, roll with it, brother. Yeah. So I think everyone knows who FastPath is. If you don't, we provide solutions to do a lot of things we already been talking about today for BC. You see our URL there, but I think Cynthia and David, I think you covered a lot of the topics I wanted to talk about on the next slide. If you roll to that, Mark, a lot of what we see out there working with clients, and again, FastPath ISV around security. We're not a VAR. We don't implement. All we do is sell really good software. We see a lot of these trends with our customers from a BC nav perspective, and quite honestly for other Dynamics products as well. And it's an approach. And a lot of this has been talked about already, but I heard Cynthia start with the word planning when she talked about it and talked about her matrix. You got to plan security out. David talked about getting into the project plan. Companies make the mistake, whether you're moving to Business Central, let's say it's an upgrade project, or maybe you're implementing Business Central for the first time. You got to plan correctly. And I can tell you, too many companies just repeat what they did in the old system, whether it's saying, oh, you know what? Jane Doe had this access in the old system. She needs to have this access in the new system. And you don't take any regard planning wise to what she will be doing in the new system, what functionality is there. It might not be an apples to apples situation. So you got to plan out your security and put things in place time wise, resource wise, education wise. If you don't, you're going to run into these roadblocks. It's going to get squishy and you'll ultimately end up something that's a little bit of a mismatch. So don't just duplicate the security you had in the past. People think about moving to BC in the cloud. Can we just run a migration tool? Yeah, you can run migration tools all you want, but if you don't look at the output and make business decisions and tweak that before you actually use that in production, including security, you're running a risk there that you're probably creating gaps or holes that ultimately could lead to problems from your perspective. So that would be the first thing we would share. The second, when it comes to security, again, this is tougher in a smaller shop. Try to have some concepts and methodologies behind how you design security. There's concepts like least privilege access. Latest one Microsoft's talking about is zero trust, and that's more on the network infrastructure side. But try to build some of these security framework guidelines that are out there that are industry accepted. Least privilege access is going to say only give someone the access they need at the smallest level. No one ever complains if they have too much security provision to them. They only complain if they don't have enough to do their job. So if you start small, give them what you think is a bare minimum, the right permission sets and the like, and then you move up and maybe you can add to it. But if you give them everything up front or give a bunch of people elevated privileges up front, it's very difficult to take that away. So try to design with some of those security concepts around least privilege access and the like. I think that'll be helpful in what you're doing. And then test. This has already been talked about. But again, when you're talking about conference room pilots and other things, way too often, and this is a business application problem across any software you might be talking about, SAP, Oracle, Dynamics, what have you. People don't test security enough. It gets crunched in the project plan, and ultimately you suffer because of that. So test, build in your project plan, like David said. You can never test it enough. You're going to test your conference room pilots, the new system, the upgraded system, how the user experience is. Security is even part of that, because when you go live, how they're sitting down and where they're clicking, they need to have the right security to do their job function. If you haven't tested that with the users during your conference room pilot, unit test, system test, whatever terms you use, you're probably going to run into problems after you go live. And then this last one, David just touched upon this one as well. Security is such much more than a technical exercise. I've spoken about this a lot at user conferences over the years. A lot of executives even think of security as just an IT problem. I would argue good, strong security can be a strategic enabler for your company, and actually not a problem, but an asset. But it involves communication and buy-in from the top down, from your executives understanding why it's important to mitigate the external threats on the outside and the internal threats on the inside. We talk about fraud, segregation of duties, user access reviews, things you need to do internally, mitigate those risks. A lot of those things are business process changes. You might have a technical tool that helps you with that, but it's not all about security just being a technical exercise, both in the people you engage into provision security correctly, which includes the business process owners, the executives who own the data, and defining who should be signing off in their groups to give access to the data, to the technical tools you use. Yes, it's much broader than a technical exercise. The way I talk about, I draw an analogy, when you implemented BC, hopefully that was not just an IT project. It was executive steering committee, functional owners, you had accounting, you had finance, you had sales, marketing, warehouse, whoever involved in the project. Same holds true when you implement security successfully. It's more than a technical exercise. You get that involvement from all these other groups as well to ultimately give you the best chance for success across the board. So there's a couple of the approaches we've seen that seem to work. Doesn't mean it's easy. And security is like implementing software. It's like eating an elephant. You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Jeannie Ingalls told me 20 years ago when I was implementing Exapter for the first time. So security, you got to crawl, walk, run, eat that elephant one bite at a time, put some of these approaches in place, do them slowly at first. I think you're going to set yourself up long-term to be a better place when it comes to managing security and maintaining it. Because as David said, once you implement, it's very difficult to go backwards. The toothpaste is out of the tube, so to speak. Nate, would you have anything to add on any of those?
No, I don't think so, Frank. I think you touched on it, and I think a lot of the discussion that's already been had today so far really touches on a lot of the stuff we talk about on a day-to-day basis with our customers. So, no, I think you're good.
What would world be like if we didn't have the opportunity to talk about implementation, shortcutting, testing, and training, huh? Where would we be if we didn't have that? Gosh.
Yeah, and it's more secure. You could drop any word in front of there. Yes, yes.
Yeah, right.
Reporting. Yeah, it's unfortunate nature of the beast, so to speak.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Thanks very much, guys. Yes, indeed. And I'll just put a quick plug. I've known Frank for a long time. Boy, if you want to get serious about security in general, segregation and duties and so forth, talk to FastPath, go watch a Frank presentation. These guys know what they're talking about. They've been doing it for a long time. It's very, very impressive. I did one or two internal audit projects back before when I was consulting before, and God bless anybody that can do that, because it's painful. All right. And Jason Sanholm from Group O, another longtime user group member, pretty decent sized company out Iowa way as well. We got a little Iowa theme going. And Jason, I've got your slides loaded in here as well, if you're ready.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so quick topics to cover. I know so far the conversation has been once we get in BC and how to audit BC and actually within the application. So my turn is to take a step back and say, before you can even get into the application, what are some security things can apply? So Office 365, the main benefit of the tool obviously is that the high availability and accessing it from everywhere, but it's also much more easier now. A bad guy doesn't need to get in from the outside or VPN. They can just reach out once they have your credentials. So a couple of things that I wanted to briefly talk about was multi-factor authentication for Office 365, how you can potentially limit or restrict access to Office 365, even for the users who are legitimate, but you still want to put some type of restrictions in place. There's some basic security alerts that can be configured that most people might not know to do immediately right out of the box, and just a couple Exchange tips in case you're using Exchange online. So you can hit the next slide.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, I think I was looking at the, okay, sorry. I had my slide deck up and it wasn't going anywhere. So.
No problem.
All right. So, I always want to throw out there, because it can get people's heads. Multi-factor is a huge and very, very important tool, and a lot of you probably have applications already, or your organization has some form of multi-factor, and for sure that's 100% going forward. It's a really nice standard, but MFA can still be gotten around. There can just be out and out exploits, or maybe the MFA implementation isn't working quite like what you want. I know some MFA implementations that it really is just MFA for an RDP access, but you can still connect to the server through other means. So just just a disclaimer, it's not the golden key there. So, but MFA for Office 365 is just the free MFA that they offer. Now that's kind of referred to legacy MFA. I find it's tricky. I don't know if anybody else has seen this, but Office 365 changes so frequently and so drastically. I just realized that they changed that name as I was gathering information for this slide deck. So that's how often it seems to happen. So personally, I've had hit or miss experiences with the legacy MFA. And generally, if the organizations have it or could afford it, I think using conditional access rules are the way to go, which is the next way you can enforce MFA in the organization. So that does require an additional license of Azure AD Premium for each user, which gives you some additional benefits as well, but I won't go into. That's even how today I have our organization kind of set up through conditional access rules, and it really does work very well. And we'll talk more about conditional access rules in the next slide deck. Some other things you can do too. So whenever I implement MFA, I'm a very user conscious security guy, I like to say. So I get that people don't want to use MFA if they don't have to. And a lot of the times too, you can just disable that based on your company. So if your company has a corporate location or a warehouse location and it's got a public IP that never changes, if you're in that building, do you need to MFA? Is that one less thing that now your end users can do and they need to authenticate? And I'd argue, yeah, I'd argue that if you're at a warehouse building that is owned and you basically have a key code to get into it, everyone in there is an employee, they probably don't need to provide MFA. So I would throw that out there as, however you can make it easier for the users while still being relatively safe and protecting your accounts out there. Yeah. So another real quick tip is at the moment anyway, you can still use legacy authentication. So even if you did today, right now, your organization turns on Office 365 MFA or legacy MFA, if you don't disallow legacy authentication, that can just be bypassed. And that's going away later this year. It was supposed to have gone away last month, but I'll throw that out there that there are a couple ways you can disable legacy authentication. And if you don't do it, MFA and Office 365, can be bypassed. This is to me what a really cool slide deck. MFA is good and fine, but once you kind of get MFA set up, you kind of wipe your hands of it. It's done and it's set up. But restricting access to Office 365, there's so many different scenarios and conditions and policies you can apply. So again, if we're talking about using this with conditional access and that P1 licensing, and honestly, if you've got like an E3 license or whatever, not E3 alone. I think there's a bundle, but you may even already have P1 licensing. But it is really interesting, especially if you've got warehouse workers that they only access BC from within your location. So maybe they should never be accessing BC from home, but maybe your managers, your directors, or IT can. You can throw them in a security group and say that you deny access to BC or Office 365 while they're not coming from a trusted location. That's a really cool thing that people are doing, and especially that's an HR thing. I know more than anything, they don't want even the ability for people to work from home that shouldn't be working from home. So that's kind of a neat one. You can take it a step further if your company actually hands out, if it's got an on-prem AD solution or even an Azure AD solution with your own laptops, you can even require that the device authenticating to Office 365 is a hybrid join machine, which that's Azure's way of just saying that it's a company machine, and it's joined from AD. So if you want to say that only only laptops that have that we set it up and it meets our standards, we've got AV on it. Especially if you use something like Intune, you can basically say that these are the requirements to access Office 365, and if you don't meet it, again, you can deny it, or you could even just apply something like require multi-factor or something along those lines. So Really just a lot of different scenarios, honestly, based on what your kind of user, the cases that you're trying to accomplish. So I will say, as one kind of disheartening note that I would really have liked, and it's one thing I looked at and I just assumed it would come with it, but there's no time-based restrictions, because I thought, from a security perspective, perfect. Like 99% of our employees aren't going to be working after a certain period of time. Like they're definitely not going to be logging in at 2 a.m. We should definitely just disable their accounts, but as far as I can tell at this moment in time, you can't do that. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, we can real quick talk about this. There is a very, very cheap license that can be purchased. It just needs to be assigned to one person, as far as I can ever tell. I've done this in a couple organizations. So once you have the Cloud App Security license, you can create some canned alerts that are, I can't tell you how important they are if you don't have MFA on today. This is something that saved me quite a few times. That especially, so if somebody does fall victim to a phishing email and their account and their password is out there for anybody to see, you'll get a lot of times they log in from Nigeria, Norway, all these other countries, and so a lot of times it hits these alerts. Boom, log in from an infrequent country. You go log in and you see that you got Kimco logging in from Iowa, and then you've got Kimco logging in from Botswana or something like that. Okay, she was probably compromised at that point. And not saying that ever happened to Kimco, but that's an example.
It was France. It was France, and Jason's like, "Are you in France?" And I'm like, "Yes." I forgot to tell you.
In fact, in my organization, and I just have it to where if it's the logins coming from a country that we don't operate in, the rules just set to block it right off the bat anyway. But before we did that, before we saw the light, that login, that alert helped us quite a bit. There's also the impossible travel. So you log in from Washington, and then you log in from Florida within 30 minutes. It's going to trigger as like, there's no way you travel that far. That's a really good one to know. And there's a couple other ones, obviously, you can see on the screen that would be really handy to know. Suspicious inbox forwarding is a really good one. If your account's been compromised and if they're just slowly trying to exfiltrate data, they can just set up a forwarding rule. That's kind of an old trick. So if you don't have this today, honestly, I don't think there's any reason why any company shouldn't get this today, because the cost for the license is so cheap. And even if you do nothing else, you can get some really good alerts based off of some of this stuff. I mean, because I think the license is only like, I don't know, like $7 or something like that.
Yeah, Jason, we bought the EMS E5. That's it's the bundle. So it's Azure AD Premium, which includes conditional access, also identity protection, plus Intune. So you get them all. It's not. I'd say I'm with you. Like, these slides are like hitting every note of projects we're working on currently. I don't know if anyone else is, but we have a similar thing. But we do have travelers who vacation overseas, so we just changed the. Let me just say this real quickly. Nobody wants to get an MFA prompt every day, and you shouldn't, because you'll go snowblind to MFA prompts. So we actually we have hybrid Azure AD joined devices, Jason. So that's our 2FA. Via conditional access.
Exactly. Most people don't realize that, because I think it's all about phones. It's like having the equipment and knowing the password is two things, and that's good enough.
Yep. So anyway, I'm just jiving on this so hard, and I'll let everyone else ask you questions.
That's
but
awesome.
We do things like, if it's a foreign country, if it's not North America, we just prompt you for MFA every day. You're just gonna, if you're in the Bahamas vacationing, your punishment is MFA every day. But also we do the same thing. We have plant workers. They come to the plant, that their role does not need to work outside of the physical building. Declare it a trusted location with the IP addresses, as you alluded, and we set a block to if they try to access outside of that physical location, because their job isn't a sales rep who travels. It's a plant worker who turns a wrench. So anyway, and I can't believe you mentioned always on VPN, because that's the one that most people don't think about. But anyway. And then you can add other apps in. So that, Jason, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but there are other apps that are supported, that are cloud apps. Like we use AFS Excedra for trade promotion management. When you go look in the Enterprise App Store in Azure, there it is. You can say conditional access, only allow this from hybrid Azure AD joined devices. So Jason and I will stop geeking out now, and I will turn it back over.
So with the E5, you guess, and Frank is right, you get all the toys with E5. I think you even get Defender, was it Defender ATP?
Yeah, and we use
the
identity
antivirus.
protection, like you said. We get identity protection alerts to our help desk, and that's when someone got phished, and we jump right on it. So anyway, good stuff. You guys are doing
Yeah, the always-on VPN is a good solution, and just by the fact that it will allow you to apply conditional and Intune, conditional rules in Intune. So yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you take away nothing, if you don't have the robust setup that David certainly has, because it sounds like they're using all the features, if just to be aware more than anything, that's what I've been trained anyway, is that prevention is awesome if you can do it, but detection is king. So you can skip to the next slide.
Oh, sorry. I had to flip over for 1 second. There you go.
Good. Last slide deck talks just a little bit about Exchange, because in my world anyway, it's the gateway drug of viruses and phishing and stuff like that. So what you can do if you want to be proactive, you can actually restrict inbound and outbound to people who really need it, especially if your organization deals with some people that deal with sensitive information. And you need to place some type of restriction on them. Let's say, for example, you have a call center and none of those people should ever email outbound. Why not have a rule that they can't do that then? Or even on an inbound email, if it contains a zip. And not to say that zip should be blocked, but if you really, it's like, no, these people, they'll never get a zip file. They don't receive large files. Then you'll never have to get a zip file, that says, here's the password, open me, and then have something malicious installed. I mean, I've had that happen when end user, they get an email and they do as they're told. They open the compressed file and ask for a passcode, they enter it and they double click and they install a virus. So lots of cool things you can do. Some of the stuff too, you learn the hard way. Like I learned that I should do that the hard way after it already happened. Which is why I just mentioned that in here. There's also some capabilities Office 365 for DLP. So the Social Security stuff, I can already tell you right off the bat, it's a false positive magnet. But if you deal with it and you have to meet the audit requirements. For the PCI audit requirement, not PCI, sorry, for whatever the audit is that you're doing. I'm not a big audit person, but I'm in a lot of them. But anyway, we do have to show that we've got tight restrictions on Social Security numbers. So really good to get those alerts. Credit cards, that's much easier for Office 365 to detect and block if you are in a PCI environment. So I was going with that one. Last couple things. As far as emails go, most emails that are malicious have links in them nowadays. They don't bother attaching a malicious file because it's so easy for those things to be blocked and detected. So they just get you to click on a link to try to get you to go to malicious website. Office 365 does have URL scanning and rewriting. So even if at the very beginning of it, if it doesn't recognize it's a malicious URL, but enough people report on it and it's detected later on, then as that email is sitting in your inbox, that URL will no longer work when you click on it. There are other solutions that can do this. Proofpoint is also a really good one. I mentioned Proofpoint because I don't think anybody here is in the pockets of Microsoft. And when I've tested them, Proofpoint is not a foolproof solution, but did seem to work better. So I felt like I had to throw it out there. And lastly, if somebody did click on a malicious email or somebody, I get that all the time. Hey, I clicked on this link, and the link is to a very effective phishing campaign, or it contains a virus. I want to find out all the people who got that email, and so you can do a really quick mail flow search to see, who all the list of people who got this email from so and so, and you can do some investigations on that instead of emailing the whole company. Because again, I can email the whole company, but like you said, they just get numb. It's another security thing. I'm not going to pay attention. It's probably not to me anyway. So that's the end of my slide deck. Sorry, I ran a bit long, but there's so much. I couldn't figure out what to cut.
So let me add that, Jason, that's all great stuff. Let me add one thing, which I try to wrap all this together. Look at security like a donut. Now, I know there's square donuts out there now, and there's donuts that don't have. Let's talk about a regular yeast donut that has a hole in the middle. That donut, all the stuff Jason just talked about, is on the outside. External threats, external threats, external threats. extremely important. You got to handle that. Your CIOs, your CISOs and the like require that. Where those same folks maybe struggle a bit is inside the donut, the middle, where there's a hole in your business applications like Business Central, like Nav. What are you doing to have the right security technologies, business processes, procedures deployed to fill that donut hole and make sure your security then is all encompassing with mitigating the threats from the outside and those threats from the inside? A lot of the stuff we talked about today, the first couple of us, was about the inside. Jason's covering the outside. You don't want to eat the security donut. You want to plug that hole in the middle. And if you're struggling with Business Central, getting executives other to buy into the need of improving your security, ask them what they're doing on the outside, and they'll probably go through this list of what Jason's talking about, and then explain to them, well, 70% of the threats are still, from a fraud perspective, start internally. What about that hole we have in the middle? And we found a lot of success when people look at it that way. So, oh my gosh, yeah, we need to do it holistically, not just outside in, but inside out as well. Of course, it gets you hungry when you talk about donuts.
Makes everybody happy. He's talking about donuts. Jason, bottom line, all these emails over the years from the Nigerian prince, that's all been garbage. So the ones that I still get, those are valid now. Is that correct?
That's my retirement plan. He never said that.
Yeah, you've not been shipping them, a percentage of your paycheck every month, and
I think that's who you contact now, Mark, to get the COVID vaccine, right?
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Now, right? Yeah.
Hey, I'm an optimist.
They range. They range so much. The ones that I found are the most fun. They're the phishing emails are actually called sexploitation, and that's where they email you saying that they hacked your camera and they saw all the things you've done, and it's completely bogus, but it's just it was entertaining to read.
I get that one a lot, and my response to that is, I know it's not true because I don't watch porn on machines with cameras.
That's right.
Yeah.
Linda's smarter than that. Yeah. Fantastic. Wow. Folks, that was absolutely tremendous. You're way above and beyond the call on that one. Thank you to all our presenters. It was Cynthia, David, Nate, Frank, and Jason. I posted the survey link in the chat here if you're running off. Of course, we've got this recording. We'll post it out there because I know you're going to want to go back and capture some of these tools and the thoughts that were shared there. That was very, very impressive. So, folks, thank you. Ran a little long, well worth it. We've got the February event. Just join Meetup, and then you won't have to worry about tracking these going forward. And I think we got it. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining and sticking through it today.
And thanks again for putting this together.
Stay safe, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone. Yeah, stay safe.